Saroyan on Screen, a year-long look at the cinema and television presentations of William Saroyan. I'm your host, Chris Garcia. Today, we're looking at Saroyan's one cinematic directorial project, The Good Job. After Saroyan delivered the treatment to the human comedy, Louis B. Mayer was hesitant to allow Saroyan to direct the picture. Saroyan, though, thought he was the only one who could possibly direct the picture and draw the emotional notes out of it. Saroyan had directed shows for Broadway, including The Time of Your Life, but he had not directed a single film himself. Mayer suggested that Saroyan should direct a short film as a sort of application for the job of directing the human comedy. Saroyan accepted the idea and got to work. MGM had been producing short films since its beginning. Most theatrical film presentations included at least one short preceding the feature, along with a newsreel. Animation and live-action films were distributed with MGM features. Some of these were produced by the same teams that worked on the larger productions. Occasionally, segments of feature films were also released, including some of Busby Berkeley's legendary dance numbers. MGM produced a series of shorts called MGM Miniatures. These were 1 and 2 reel films, usually between 10 and 20 minutes. These films actually launched many film careers, especially for performers like Judy Garland, Laurel and Hardy, and Our Gang, or the Little Rascals. These were typically made fast and cheap, usually shooting for a week or less, but were a vital part of the cinematic experience for decades. Now, while Saroyan was supposed to be working on his first short film, he was actually featuring much of his attention on the human comedy. He spent hours discussing it with producers Arthur Freed and Joe Mankiewicz, director Victor Fleming, and writer Charles Lederer. Saroyan's view of the piece was key to his belief in the success of the project. Fleming and Freed were very supportive, though writers seemed more skeptical of Saroyan's prowess. He first made mention of his choice for the content of the short in his journal on March 11, 1942. Dictated a number of the poor into a screenplay for 1 reel, which I intend to further today, with nervous Seymour Stern. Stern, best known as the biographer of legendary silent film director D.W. Griffith, worked for MGM on various projects, mostly as a script doctor or consultant. Saroyan was far from the only person ever to call Stern nervous. Here, he would serve as special assistant director. A number of the poor appeared in Saroyan's collection Peace, It's Wonderful. It is one of those Saroyan stories that are less story and more illustrative series of vignettes. This would not be an obvious choice for a Saroyan film debut. In that same collection, pieces like 1924 Cadillac for Sale or The Warm, Quiet Valley of Home would seem more suited to film adaptation. The story is a series of reminiscences of a young man's month working at his uncle's market, the people who visited, and their stories. It would appear to be based at least partly on Saroyan's own experiences working in the market of his uncle, prior to the publication of The Daring Young Man and the Flying Trapeze. It's a story of the type that would come to be called Saroyan-esque. Perhaps that fact made it an ideal film for Saroyan's film debut. On Saturday, March 14, 1942, Saroyan began the production on his short with a meeting. Well, Harry Cohen, short's production man, came over and brought Eddie Imazu, a swell Japanese artist, and we talked about sets. The ball was rolling on the actual production. Saroyan met with many in MGM's production area, and it appears that Eddie Mannix was trying to speed things along. On March 16th, Hedda Hopper, one of the leading gossip columnists in the U.S. at the time, reported that Saroyan was directing a short, titled A Number of the Poor, as his bid to direct the human comedy. Saroyan had been mentioned by the columnist previously, but this was clearly an important step forward, as his previous mentions had typically been tied to his theater work. This was strictly about film. That transition is important as it showed how effective Saroyan was at making his name known in MGM and the wider Hollywood community. It's also highly likely that one of Mayer's people had been instructed to leak the information to Hopper. Filming on what was still being called A Number of the Poor began on March 18th, 1942. Saroyan came to set accompanied by Stern and Stanley Rose, who was acting as his agent. "The work went okay," said Saroyan in his journal. "Mayer came on the set, but soon disappeared. He told me I had a lot of hair and could pull it out." That Mayer took time out to visit the set himself, especially of a short film, showed how important Saroyan was to MGM, and giving his set a visit showed his personal dedication to Saroyan. There's no list of the actors on the film included, no title card or credits, though there is a card that lists 4 names on the production side. Director of Photography, William O'Connell, ASC. Special Assistant Director, Seymour Stern. Art Director, Eddie Imazu. Film Editor, Jack Ruggiero. We've already mentioned Stern, but William O'Connell is one of several possible cinematographers in the history of MGM. Eddie Imazu was a beloved fixture at MGM, a holdout from Metro Studio, one of the 3 that merged to form MGM in the 1920s. He had been nominated for an Oscar in 1936 for his work on The Great Ziegfeld. He would later work on a variety of MGM productions, including The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. This was possibly his last credit for 6 years. Mere weeks after the production of The Good Job, he relocated to a Japanese internment camp along with his family. The executive order that sent so many Japanese Americans to the camps came roughly a month before Saroyan shot the film, but MGM had moved Imazu onto the lot, allowing him to remain until he decided to relocate to the Jerome Relocation Center along with his family. He would return following the war and work for MGM for another 30 years. Jack Ruggiero was a workman editor for MGM Short for years before moving on to television in the 1950s. Though he did edit several low-budget films, mostly genre works, including The Amazing Transparent Man. Saroyan did record some of his actors in his journal, though not fully. Pass Loire came out, and I immediately wrote him in, with some stuff that's funny as hell to me. Next, saw some kids. I think Taliaferro must be the woman who steals the cantaloupe. Mayer's baby, Dick Simmons, can't read worth a shit, but the guy came in today who read like a killer, named Horace McNally, star of Johnny Belinda. Okay, he's the guy. Couldn't get Harry Bratsburg. While the names aren't attached to specific roles, except for one, the woman who steals the cantaloupe. Saroyan notes that Taliaferro was the one for the role. It's likely that refers to the actress Mabel Taliaferro, who had been a well-known stage actress as well as a star of silent pictures. Photos would seem to indicate that she is in fact the woman who stole the cantaloupe. Horace McNally was a stage actor who had come to Hollywood and began to use the name Stephen McNally, though not until after 1945. He would have originally come to Saroyan's attention in the Broadway play Johnny Belinda, as he mentions, playing the role of Dr. Jack Davidson. He would later play the role of Lockie McCormick in the 1946 film version of the play. Saroyan did see Johnny Belinda in 1940, when it played at the Belasco Theater, where 2 Saroyan plays were also presented in 1940. Saroyan mentions Dick Simmons, who Saroyan thought was awful. Simmons was apparently a favorite of Mayer, was an MGM contract player, and would end up having more than 50-year careers acting in film and television. It's uncertain whether or not he appeared in the film, though most likely not. Another Saroyan mentioned in his journal was Pass Loire, who had been around Hollywood working as a background actor, though having a credited role in Buster Keaton's Mixed Magic in 1936. Next, Pass Loire killed me with his wonderful innocent comedy, and his inability to act. He blew it, but finally we made it. The Harry Bratsburg Saroyan mentioned being unable to get was an actor known for his time in the group theater in New York, working alongside actors like Carl Malden, Francis Farmer, Howard Da Silva, Elia Kazan, and Lee J. Cobb. He came to Hollywood in 1942 and took the screen name Harry Morgan. He was a beloved actor in film and television for decades, including playing Sherman T. Potter in the television series MASH and Bill Gannon on Dragnet. He would also appear in legendary director James Whale's final film, 1949's Hello Out There, based on Saroyan's play. In another journal entry, Saroyan mentions another actor. Well, Stanley was at the table as well as old Armenian con man Barseg de Hagopian, who was a kick, and he is to be in my short movie. Der Hagopian would also appear uncredited in the human comedy. His role is uncertain, but since we know that The Good Job was the first appearance of the Armenian language, it is possible that Der Hagopian was the one who said it. An interesting note in his March 18th journal said, "I put Mary Luz into a scene." This would be Luz's first film appearance. Mary Luz was the niece of Anita Luz, one of the leading screenwriters of MGM's pool. She may have played the young blonde girl, though it's difficult to tell. A note in the Gazette Montreal, when covering The Good Job as a part of covering the local presentation of the short, notes that Anthony Mazzola plays Callahan, the Candy Kid. Born in 1938, Mazzola would appear uncredited in the human comedy, and would work in various roles in front of and behind the camera until his death in a plane crash in 1974. The production was not well documented, though Saroyan mentioned in his journals that Victor Fleming, writer Louis Untermeyer, and Arthur Freed all visited the set. He also noted the daily rushes, the early developed film of each day, were okay. The picture wrapped on March 23, 1942. Finished shooting the short picture at 6:03, 3 minutes overtime. He next noted, "I think it will be pretty good, but most likely great." The release status of The Good Job has been confusing. It is often listed by biographers as unreleased, but there were clearly screenings of the film at the time, and a few since. There was a screening on September 23, 1942 for the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, as well as members of the press. The screening was very well received. From a report by James Francis Crowe on the screening, the occasion was the showing of a short film, The Good Job, which Saroyan directed from his own story at the Culver City lot. It was one of a series of new featurettes, comedic, dramatic, and documentary, which the Academy screened last night. It was also shown at the Museum of Modern Art in New York in 1942, and perhaps again in 1974 as part of an MGM retrospective. There are clear indications that it was released, at least on a small scale. The surviving prints have the official MGM logo and branding. The known copies at the Library of Congress, which was shown in 2008 at St. Vardanon's Day Lecture on Saroyan, and the one acquired by Forever Saroyan in 2025, are both 16mm sound copies. This was not the regularly projected format for live screen, which would be 35. More often, 16mm was the preferred format for educational and other small projection spaces. While records on MGM short film releases aren't exactly widely known, save for those with big names or the animated pieces, it's clear there was some release when consulting newspapers of the time. In December of 1942, the Betty Grable film, Springtime in the Rockies, was released, and at least one theater, the Palace in Washington, D.C., played The Good Job preceding the film. Somewhat unusually, as Springtime in the Rockies was a 20th Century Fox film, and MGM had produced The Good Job. The Palace, though, was an unaffiliated theater, so it often showed various companies' films together. Other theaters appear to have shown it with various features in various areas. These included I Married a Witch in Memphis, Tennessee, Moon and Sixpence in Toronto, Canada, with White Cargo in Brownsville, Texas and Dayton, Ohio, A Night to Remember at the Colonial in Elmira, Texas, and with Moscow Strikes Back on its extended U.S. and international tour, including both Oakland and San Francisco, California. All these would seem to indicate at least a limited release. Notes and ads in newspapers appearing throughout 1942 and into 1943, with the last ones appearing in the UK and Australia in mid-1943. It's known that The Good Job was circulating in the 1970s among film collectors, with several reporting having seen it, including Leonard Maltin, legendary film critic. He mentioned that he'd seen it when on The Dick Cavett Show as a young man, appearing with Saroyan on the episode. On The Dick Cavett Show, Maltin asked Saroyan about the short, and he responded, "I remember it vividly. That was the film I meant to demonstrate to Mr. L.B. Mayer that I should direct the human comedy. Now, he says, if you make a good film in 6 days, you can direct a human comedy. Well, I made a good film in 6 days, and he says it's not good. It was arbitrary." In a letter to theater critic and friend Leonard Lyons, Saroyan said, "I think I have made a very interesting short picture, and someday, when you see it, I would like to know what you think of it." Mayer had different thoughts. It's not completely clear what he thought of it, but he certainly wasn't a big fan. He didn't appear to elucidate the reasons beyond thinking the cinematography was not up to snuff. According to an article by Ira Wolfert, the studio was of the opinion it was overexposed film. Watching The Good Job today does show some weaknesses and strengths. The performances are not top flight, true, but they are genuine. The script and setting feels a bit stagey, feeling as if it was a scene of a play put to film. At the time, that sort of presentation wasn't particularly popular, as it had been the basis for almost all film in the early silent era. There was a stiffness to it. The script, though, is pure Saroyan, much of it word for word from A Number of the Poor, and it delivers in scenes such as the interaction between our main character and a young boy he considers to be a little gentleman. Much of the story is told through voiceover, which allows Saroyan's original voice to come through. We see our main character interact with various characters, including an immigrant who utters some words in Armenian. Whether or not this is Daragopian is hard to tell, or it could even be Past Loire. This was the first appearance of the Armenian language in an American film made by a studio. But who spoke it? We are uncertain. The sets are strong, the costuming relatively simple, and the editing is fantastic. The use of double exposure, for example, gives a sort of otherworldliness to some moments as he interacts with a variety of people moving in and out of his life, some of them seeming to overlap. The entire film felt like the kind of short subject you would see in the 1940s. But did it rise up to MGM standards at the time? MGM's shorts were well regarded, and watching several of the surviving shorts today, The Good Job holds up fairly well. The pacing is a bit unusual, but certainly follows the stream of many of the other shorts MGM released. Other than that certain weakness in the cinematography in the early portion of the film, it's a very pretty picture. A note that is worth taking is that in 1942, MGM had turned its attention to producing works that were themed around the war, particularly in their shorts. It is possible that Mayer was not interested in wide release of the kind of material The Good Job represented. The fact that it did get released with the MGM Miniatures logo, with the MGM Miniatures branding, does seem to indicate that maybe Mayer didn't hate it as much as been believed. Then again, MGM had the material, and in those days there was massive demand for films. So why not send it around, even if not acknowledging it as a true release? The reviews of the time certainly seem to be accurate looking back at them now. The Washington Daily News reviewed it as, presenting his homespun Cracker Barrel view of life, Saroyan develops his human sketch around a philosophical grocer who knows and loves these everyday folks. Unique in style and touching in idea, the short is outstanding. The Toronto Star said, "Then there's the new William Saroyan short subject, The Good Job, which, while you may not know what Saroyan is driving at, and sometimes we wonder if Saroyan knows himself, is a highly interesting bit of whimsy. Following his delivery of the good job, Saroyan went to Mayer. Mayer, not appreciating the short, made the decision not to allow Saroyan to direct. This mostly ended Saroyan's relationship with MGM, for the time. But the human comedy would go into production shortly, and that will be covered in our next episode. Thank you for listening to Saroyan on Screen. Next time we're looking at the human comedy, followed by a look at Saroyan and MGM after the human comedy. So I hope you'll stay tuned.